Working Cows Podcast, episode 395. This episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios. And this episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals. C90 Ocean Minerals, the leading mineral and trace element sea salt for your herd, is now available nationwide at Tractor Supply Company. We're excited to bring the incredible benefits of our mineral-rich sea salt to more farmers and ranchers across the country. To find your closest Tractor Supply location, visit us at c-90.com/tractor today. Trouble with flies? Select stores also carry C90 mineral salt with garlic for fly control. Learn more today at c-90.com/tractor. Very excited to be joined today by Grant Vassberg. Grant is a seed stock producer at Kallion Farms in Texas, but he's also the starter of a new company called Boss Sires. And Boss Sires seeks to connect breeders of functional genetics with those people looking to get more functional genetics into their herds. And he's been on this journey of finding these functional genetics and now launching Boss Sires, which will be linked in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/395. You can go there and find Boss Sires, and they've been doing some great videos with names maybe you're familiar with from around the seed stock industry, all kinds, Boss Indicus, Boss Taurus, Herefords and Angus and all kinds of African breeds and everything. So very excited to hear about the journey that he's been on to start this new company. So Grant, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, bud.
Yeah, Steve Campbell, just as he is wont to do at times, has just dropped me a text message and said, "Hey, Grant Vassberg has a story to tell." And so when Steve Campbell makes a recommendation, my ears perk up for sure. And then we had a little bit of a chance to talk a little bit about what is going on there and some of the things that you're trying to get started and some of the things you've been doing over the last number of years. So, I think it was pretty interesting to me, kind of some of the realizations that you've come to recently, or maybe not so recently, but as far as what makes a good cow, what makes a long-lasting cow, kind of the commonalities of some of those cows that fit multiple environments, kind of seem to work in multiple different zip codes and countries. Is that so? Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Kind of what were some of those things that you first recognized?
Yeah, no, I guess when I was growing up, Kallion Farms, we're Brahman breeders, but my dad was kind of known as a pioneer for adopting newer technologies and doing embryo work, DNA work, growth safe bunks, all of that. But as a kid, I was actually the boots on the ground and was with the cows on a day-to-day basis. And what I kind of discovered was really when I was in high school, and my dad and his PhD consultants and breeding consultants would come out and discuss which animals we were going to use as replacements and what bulls we were going to breed. And I guess with me actually being there on a day-to-day basis, I was seeing the cows that, hey, there's certain cows that can give you a calf every year and that had a certain look and whatnot, but on paper, you couldn't find those, and those cows weren't getting rewarded. So I know in like 2010s when I took over the breeding program, and that's where I could just kind of put the brakes on all the technology and kind of was like, hey, no, let's get back to the principles of raising cows and get back to what cows are meant to do. So it just kind of radically changed the operation, and I guess here we are today, 2024, still kind of breeding cattle based on the principles of what cows are supposed to do.
Yeah, what are some of those main things that you're expecting a cow to do?
First of all, a cow's got to raise you a calf every year, but she's got to do it with the nutrition that's available. And that if you're having to feed the cows or supplement the cows every day, I mean, it's just not profitable. And when you're relying on cattle to really as a way to make a living, that's when you start appreciating certain types of cows. But yeah, no, I know like docility is huge here, and like you shouldn't be having to trim hooves, or I mean the birth weight's got to be acceptable, and like cow's got to be able to take care of her calf, and the calf's got to be able to get up and suck on its own. And it just seems like the cattle industry today, people really forgotten the basics, or kind of gotten away from what a cow's supposed to do, and a lot of times they don't realize or don't even know what a profitable cow is, what she's supposed to do.
No, I think that's definitely true. You mentioned that you were noticing some of these commonalities, right?
Sure.
Among these cows that would give you a calf every year. What were some of those things that first caught your eye?
Sure. I mean, overall, they were way more moderate framed, and they were way deeper bodied or had a big springer rib. And the docility, they're naturally a lot more docile and less stressful. And I know, I mean, I'll touch on it later on in this talk, but one thing I did notice, even when I was in high school, that because my dad his focus was trying to create a high marbling Brahma, which he thought that would radically change the world, which it could. But what I even noticed though is you can have both. That these animals that were real easy flushing and easy keeping type cows, they actually had good marbling characteristics also. Like I said, I'll touch up more on that later on, but even back then I noticed, I was like, hey, well, you can do both. Like you don't have to be, or by breeding for maternal traits doesn't mean you sacrifice marbling. I know fast forward to today, I've kind of figured out there is a correlation there.
When you're looking at a Bos Taurus breed and a Bos Indicus breed, both of those cows that are going to stay around for a long time, cows that are going to give you a calf every year without a bunch of extra supplements, do they look more similar than maybe the Bos Taurus that's going to win the show and the Bos Indicus that's going to win the show?
Yeah, no, I was laughing talking to a friend the other day that within every breed, there's breeds within breeds, but what you're talking about on this, when you hone in on this certain type of animal, that you can say, hey, this is the animal or the cow that Mother Nature intended, or this is this hormonally balanced animal that is adapted to their environment. Yeah, they have a very certain look, and they're more the right kind of Hereford is going to be a lot more similar to my Brahmins than my Brahmins compared to the Brahmins that win the show. Like you can take the hump off and change the hair coat, and they're going to look. They're very similar, I guess, which has been pretty cool to see her across these different breeds.
Yeah, is that something that kind of you've noticed, or something that surprised you? Did you think that's the way it would turn out?
Yes and no. I mean, I guess fast forward to today, but what was it, about 3 years ago, I was kind of doing a little bit of construction work and thinking that, hey, if I'm making additional income, I could retain more heifers in ownership and grow the herd. And I'll give credit to my wife. She kind of slapped me around a little bit, or woke me up, and she's like, Grant, get back to your cattle, quit this construction stuff. Like, cattle is what made you and what got our headquarters. And so that's where I started traveling internationally about 2.5 years ago. And I want to say I've been to about 7 different countries now. And that's what really kind of woke me up too, is that you go to Paraguay and here's these breeders in Paraguay that are producing awesome cattle. And it's like, hey, they honed in on the same type of animal that I've got. And so anyway, that's has been kind of cool to go to all these countries, and in all these countries like Colombia, there's breeders breeding for functional cattle there, and they got Brahmins that look just like mine, that they've all kind of honed in on this very unique, but in my eyes, very beautiful type animal also. One of my most recent trips was when I was in Colombia about a year ago. And when I was down there, I was literally nicknamed the crazy gringo. That they heard there's this crazy gringo guy that was traveling saying he could fix fertility with genetics. And is when I was in Colombia, that's when it really hit me that I was like, man, I need a cooperative, because no, Kallion's not the only answer. And I know Kallion's just one of the answers, or it's just a piece of the puzzle. But when I was in Colombia, I started mentioning these other names. I was like, well, yeah, have y'all like Kemper Cattle Company in Florida, and there's like Leo Casas in Belleville, Texas, and I started naming off these breeders that have functional cattle in the U.S. also, but the problem is no one in Colombia has ever heard of them, and that's where it really hit me in the gut. I was like, hey, I need a cooperative to where I sound a lot more believable or less crazy, if you want to call it that, when I go, hey, here's multiple options. So anyway, that's where the concept of Boss Sires was first born, and figuring out a business model that would work or be sustainable in itself took some time. And but no, it's been an awesome journey working on this project, and that's where I've stumbled across these other breeds and met awesome cattlemen like the Meitlers up in Kansas, and that's where I've kind of discovered that even in these other breeds, the best breeders are still having some of the same struggles I'm having, and that there's no company representing these type of genetics. And I guess in this past year to 2 years, I've heard the term sustainable genetics used, and which I get it. I mean, that's one way of looking at it or calling it, but in my eyes, I call it like your old school badass cattleman genetics. That these kind of genetics have been around a long time, and it's going to the guys like the Meitlers that have stuck to their guns using genetics that are very old school line one type cattle. And anyway, the solution to fixing fertility is it's been here all these years. It's genetics, and it's the guys that have been sticking to their guns. I know, like, for example, and what really put everything into perspective for me was when I was in Florida, and I met I've heard of this breeder, and he's been around forever, and I've just never seen his cattle. But his name is Marcus Shackelford, and he's still using Brahma genetics from the 60s. And when I saw his cattle, that's where it hit me in the gut that I was like, damn, his cows look like mine. And that's really when it hit me. I was like, wow, that's all I've done is I've tried to recreate what was already here. Or that's all Kallion has been doing since 2010 when I took over, is I've just been going backwards.
Backwards in a good way.
Yeah, backwards in a good way. But it was a cool punch in the gut. Just like, wow. I'm not saying it took away, like, yeah, this past 15 years weren't meaningless, but no, but I guess what's cool though is with working on this Boss Sires deal is I guess also what was cool about my history is that I grew up in this technology world, and where my dad was using all this stuff, and that's where I guess it's kind of given me a unique perspective on stuff. That you look at it from a scientific perspective on what do I have in common with George Kempfer in Florida, and with the Meitlers in Kansas, and with my buddy Stewart in Australia, or John Atkinson in Australia. Like, hey, these kind of cattle that are what Mother Nature intended them to be, like, they do have very unique characteristics, and that's been awesome or fascinating to figure out.
So do you envision Boss Sires becoming like a genetics company for functional cattle, similar to other ones out there? And I don't necessarily want to mention any names or anything, but I mean, is that kind of what you're doing? Is becoming that kind of a place?
Sure. But instead of being a traditional genetic company, I've been explaining to my wife, or just people in general, that in my opinion right now, what needs to change in the United States is the incentive structure, that these guys doing the right thing aren't getting rewarded for it. And that, like, every time I sell 5 heifers or 5 bulls, I'm just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and I'm not fundamentally fixing this. So that's where with Boss Sires, it's set up like a cooperative, to where instead of a generic semen company where I go and buy a bull from the Meitlers, for example, and put a Meitler Hereford in this lineup, they're consigning a bull and getting royalties, and where we're really trying to fundamentally change this at the base. And a lot of that is tapping into these international markets, and what's been, I guess, also crazy, but it makes sense. But like these countries in Central America, a lot of them are literally at 40% calf crops, and they don't realize that the main contributor to this problem isn't nutrition; it's the genetics from the U.S. they've been buying. That, hey, in Honduras, there's not a local feed store in every little town like there is in the U.S., and the cow's got to make it with what's there. And I don't know, it's been crazy, but at the same time, I've been meeting awesome cattlemen that are in these countries. Like there's a guy I've gotten to know in Mexico. His operation's called Rancho La Victoria, but he's been breeding functional Bos Indicus cattle, like cattle that are adapted to their environment and can thrive on what's available. And but what's sad is people call him crazy, and the other breeders in that area all think he's a lunatic because he's not following mainstream practices and the mainstream genetics. And he's screaming like, guys, stop, like stop what y'all are doing. But then when he discovers Boss Sires, I mean, I can say it did more than just make his day. He was like, Grant, finally, here's the company or this cooperative that I can become part of, to where people can't call me crazy. And that's going on in all these countries, all over these different regions. I know, like just 2 months ago, I gave a speech in Costa Rica, and where I was kind of dropping the bomb on a lot of these people. But at the end of my speech, I told them that, hey, the cure to fixing fertility problems in Costa Rica, I was like, it's not technologies. I was like, guys, the cure for it's already here. I was like, there's going to be some old guy that's been doing the right thing for all these years in your country, and he's sitting on genetics that can change everything. And literally less than 24 hours, I was at a guy's ranch the next day, and there's like 75 to 80 cows in these working pens, and I pointed out at a cow. I was like, hey, who is that cow right there? And my buddy started laughing. He's like, yeah, Grant, that cow and two others. There's 3 cows that I bought from an old man that passed away 5 years ago. And his ranch was called BOA, like BOA. And I was like, well, how have these cows done for you? He's like, Grant, all 3 of these cows have given me a calf every year for the past 5 years. They've never missed. I was like, wow, like, there it is. But what's sad is that man passed away without ever getting the recognition, or without people ever finding out that he was sitting on it.
What do you think it is that set you up to be able to see these things? I mean, once somebody points them out to somebody, I think they're pretty easy to see. Once you sit through, one of Steve Campbell's classes, and he talks about the red Solo Cup cow, and he talks about walking downhill on level ground and slope from hooks to pins, and it gets a lot easier to see it, right? But
sure,
what helped you see it?
I guess what helped me was being boots on the ground, living and breathing the cattle every day as a kid. I think my father got into the cattle harder when I was around 8 years old, but at the same time, also it takes numbers. That at one point we had 900 registered females, and I know when I took over and started my program, within 5 years, only 33 of those 900 survived my operation. But I guess where I'm getting at is just from a statistical standpoint, 900, it almost takes 900 to have 33 for you to see, hey, there's something going on with those particular cows. And that, nothing against someone that owns cows, but statistically, what are the odds that you're sitting on that 5% or sitting on one of those 33 type of cows, or one of those type of cows? So I guess that's where it's hard to see for a lot of people, but to me, it just took that many numbers and actually working the cows every day to kind of catch on that there is a unique look to these cows. And other breeders calling me crazy for a while, or they're like, oh yeah, Grant likes those soggy type females, or those deep bodied, heavy spring of rib type cows, and they just kind of laugh at me that was my type of cow. And but fast forward to today, it's like, no, that I wasn't crazy. What was it? Just about 6 months ago, I was working on running an ad. How a lot of the females today that are being promoted aren't feminine, and that was a fight that I was fighting on my own. I thought that no, there is a science to femininity, and it's not an opinion. Or like people would tell me, oh no, Grant, like femininity is just an adjective, and that can vary from person to person. And I was very mad about that. I was like, no, there is such a thing as femininity in cattle. And I asked a friend of mine, his name's PJ Butler, but I asked him one day, I was like, hey, where can I find professional illustrations of what femininity is and masculinity is? Like, because I had sketched some stuff on a piece of paper, and I was like, I know this isn't, people would laugh at me if I throw this on an ad. And he started laughing, and PJ started laughing. He's like, Grant, you're talking about bondsman. I was like, wait, what? I was like, I did a little research on bondsman. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, that it's been out here for all these years. And no, I'm not trying to claim I'm an expert. But I maybe know 1% of what that guy knew, but the fact that data or his research and his principles have been out there. Oh, first of all, I was maybe a little mad that why isn't this mainstream? Like, because it's not crazy at all. And it's been awesome to discover that, hey, there's a huge resource of information out there and a lot of stuff to learn. But at the same time, I was a little mad that, hey, why isn't this a mainstream, or why isn't this being taught in every animal science department or every ag class in high school? For people, I've had some clients show up to my ranch here recently, and they try to call it crazy, but I tell them, I was like, no, just go out in your pasture, find your most fertile cow on calving records, and look. Just look at the cow that's in front of your face. She's going to have certain characteristics compared to that other cow that's having a 24-month calving interval is going to look way different than that cow at a 12-month calving interval. Like, it's in front of your face. Just look.
Yeah. And do you think that some of that has to do with even separating out the cows that are calving in the first cycle every year versus ones that are later every year?
Later maturing?
Well, just later. No, I'm saying late, like the ones that calve in the first cycle every year versus the ones that calve, maybe in the second or third cycle. They're always a little bit behind. Is that part of what you're looking at?
I guess somewhat, but I know, what was it, about a year and a half ago, it was after one of my trips internationally. I came home, and just for fun, I went on to my Brahman Association's website, and I figured out that the calving records of any registered cow in the United States, that her calving records are public. And not saying that every calf has been registered, but for every calf that female's had that the breeder registered, it's public. And that's where I discovered a lot of the mainstream genetics that are being promoted all over the world. Like, some of these bulls have dams that have never been pregnant naturally or never raised a calf her whole life. And that's where, I guess, these extremes are, when you take one of my type of females and compare it to a female like that won some big show that has never had a calf her whole life, that's where these principles or what cows are supposed to look like, that's when it's that drastic. And I try to explain to people, like, hey, a lot of these cows, I guess, for example, when I was in Costa Rica just 2 months ago, the show cattle there were being judged by an American judge, and literally every female class she had flipped backwards, and that the more masculine the female was, the higher it would place. And the cows that were actually feminine or productive looking automatically got last place. And I'm not saying this judge she's not evil. I just think she just doesn't realize that, just doesn't know what she's doing. But she's literally, and it was sad too. It was like, even like the oldest class, I think only one cow had a calf at side and did what she was supposed to do. And the judge put her in last place because she was too plain. And I was like, come on, it's right in front of your face. But afterwards, I walked up to the breeders that got last place in almost every class. There was one particular breeder. And after the show, I introduced myself and apologized. I was like, guys, I'm sorry, but y'all had the only cattle worth the darn here. I say worth the darn, but the only practical animals here. And I felt bad for them, and they knew it too. They're like, Grant, we know, but we're still trying to promote or still trying to educate people. But that's where I guess where I'm trying to get people here in the U.S. to realize is this problem's going on all over the world. And it's not just here in the United States. And
is that because the U.S. is influential in all of the world? Are we exporting these genetics to the world and this way of raising cattle to the world?
I mean, you can get some tinfoil hats on if you want, but no, it is a monster industry. Was it? I looked up, I don't know, don't quote me 100% on this, but I know on the USDA market reports, it was something like $400 million worth of semen were exported out of the U.S. last year. And that might have been 2023 or 2022 report. But no, it's a monster industry. And what's sad is that, like, your guys in Honduras, when they see a semen catalog and they see the grand champion such and such bull, they literally assume that's the best bull the United States has to offer. But I guess at the same time, they're assuming these cattle are fertile. Not trying to sound controversial, but it sounds pretty dumb to raise an animal that can't reproduce on its own. So they would, like, in their mind, why would an animal that wouldn't work for a commercial cattleman, why would that animal be a grand champion? Like, now I'm not mad at these guys for assuming that. Like, that does sound pretty dumb on face value.
Yeah, and that's kind of my question earlier. You said that some of these cattle, that are winning the show or whatever, have never had a calf in their life. Is that what it sounds like? To me, that kind of defeats the purpose. Like, what is a cow for?
Yeah.
She's to
like, what are we doing here?
Produce offspring. And I think that's, kind of the thing. We've been so influenced by the meat industry. What we're trying to do is produce meat. Well, the cow that will grade and marble well is probably not the cow that's going to be able to perform on grass. Now, I think there's cows that will marble on grass and are fertile, and I think you've touched on that a little bit, and we'll talk about it more here in the future. But the grading system of size and shape and yield and all those things is what becomes the detriment, not the marbling. Because I think those, like I said, go back to Zeitzman, right?
Sure.
Fertility is a function of fleshing ability. Well, fleshing ability is not just the ability to get fat, but also that some of that fat's going to be intramuscular. It's going to be marbling. And so that is going to be one of those traits that we see in these fertile cattle is intramuscular fat. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And I guess to prove the point of that too is like I said earlier, my dad focused on creating a high marbling Brahma, and we were doing IMF scans and collecting kill data way back in the day. And then fast forward to today, I thought my niche was high marbling Brahmas until I discovered that, hey, a Brahman that can have a calf every year is a niche. But where a lot of people attribute the high marbling of the Kallion herd today, they think it goes back to, I guess, my father's program and all the technology we did. And that's where I'll put my foot down in a heartbeat, because it's like, no, I want to say back then, I guess in my dad's operation, our average IMF might have been around a 2.8, 3.0, somewhere in there. And my average IMF today, if I supplement feed, it's around a 5.2 IMF. And so it's like, hey, no, I didn't double his scores, but as a percentage wise, I increased him drastically without working on it. I was like, I just bred for easy flushing and functional cattle, and my IMF scores rocketed. But even today, like starting a year ago, I completely cut off all supplementation, and I'm just doing grass only. And I started dabbling a little bit with apple cider vinegar, which is how I got met up with Steve Campbell. But regardless, I'm not doing any grain supplementation on my cattle that I'm developing, or like the heifers and bulls I'm growing. And we scanned, this is like 2 months ago, and I scanned again, and out of my yearling heifers and bulls, I think I had 2 that went below a 4.0. They were right at like a 3.8. So it's like, bam, here's my cattle that would easily grade choice on grass. But anyways, sorry for getting sidetracked.
No,
there.
you're good.
Yes.
You're good. No, that's where we're at. That's what that's what I was asking, is kind of about these. It's not like cattle that can survive on grass, get pregnant every year without supplementation. Mm-hmm. It's not like they're going to be these terribly unpleasant animals to eat. They're going to be well marbled, and they're going to have good tenderness and all that stuff. They're going to check all those boxes. I think probably what is going to be the main difference, and you probably know this better than me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what's going to be the main difference is size and shape of those different cuts of meat might be a little different than what the industry's looking for. Is that right?
Yeah, they're going to be a smaller to medium frame animal for sure.
And so the ribeyes will be smaller.
A little bit smaller, yeah.
T-bones and sirloins will be a little different.
I haven't thought about it in depth too much, but just from face value, I've thought about it that, I guess in a feedlot, these animals coming from, you want to call them sustainable genetics or cattleman genetics, boss sire genetics, whatever you want to call it. But they're not going to have the wicked high average daily gains. I get that. And so I guess your return on investment as an investor wouldn't be quite as good on that standpoint, just from time. But these animals are going to eat a lot less and have a good quality grade. So it's a trade-off. But Yeah, there's differences to these animals, but I think what you're getting at is that it's still a profitable animal, and that you can still have an all around good product, and it's not, you don't have to pick one or the other. That these genetics are they're functional for the cow calf guy, but they're also not a bad animal for the next step, or for the guys that are, if they're going to retain ownership on steers and whatnot. But I think a lot of people are catching on this past. I do see a movement, and it's this grass fed industry, and I think that's where the people doing grass fed operations they know it's 100% genetics, or that genetics are huge on whether steers can pull it off or not. And I think that's where they're kind of shedding light on some of these breeders that have been doing the right thing all these years.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just taking a quick look at the Walmart website,
Yeah.
you're $3 more a pound from grass-fed to regular ground beef. Just ground beef, we're talking the difference in one ground beef to another, $3 a pound. So I mean, it's there's a premium there if you can do it without all the supplementation, without all the grain and those kinds of things. So it's not like even if there is maybe less of that animal there's a premium for the ability to market it that way. So I don't think it's totally a one-to-one comparison. Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, C90 Ocean Minerals. C90 Ocean Minerals, the leading mineral and trace element sea salt for your herd, is now available nationwide at Tractor Supply Company. We're excited to bring the incredible benefits of our mineral-rich sea salt to more farmers and ranchers across the country. To find your closest Tractor Supply location, visit us at c-90.com/tractor today. Trouble with flies? Select stores also carry C90 mineral salt with garlic for fly control. Learn more today at c-90.com/tractor. I think, one of the things that we maybe glossed over a little bit, you mentioned from 900 to 33, right? And we talked earlier that, you obviously were bringing in other replacements, so your numbers didn't go down to 33, but you had 33 of those original cows left that could make it. What were the things that you changed? What was different?
Yeah, so I didn't bring in any outside genetics. So what I was doing is I was keeping females that were out of bulls that fit what I was looking for more, and I was culling the bottom 20% of the herd while retaining heifers that were more of what I was chasing. And I guess like a big tool that I was using that I figured out, all my heifers that I had 300 something females to choose from every year. Big thing I was doing is I would go in and palpate the females at like 14, 15 months old. And I was doing a score on how mature her track was, and specifically the horns. Because I figured out really fast that the cows that had the best calf intervals, their daughters would come and hit puberty at a lot earlier age. And that your Brahman breed is notorious for people think that a Brahman female won't breed until she's 24 months old. It's not that I argue against that, but I know earlier I was talking about there's breeds within breeds, but that's where I explained to people, I was like, well, no, a Brahman cow that gives you a calf every year, she's going to hit puberty at an earlier age. And a lot of people see my heifers will start cycling at 13, 14, 15 months old, which is more similar to a Boss Taurus. So anyway, I know we can talk about some of the stuff that I'm figuring out with Boss sires, like these unique characteristics, but that is one of them, for example, that it doesn't matter the breed, that your functional cattle or your really fertile females will hit puberty at a lot earlier age, that they're earlier maturing.
Right, for sure. But what did you do to make the change? What did you take out some inputs right away, or what were some of the things? Walk me through the process of finding those 33 out of the 900.
I mean, it was a step by step, but my dad wasn't a high input ranch either. We were doing a lot of data, a lot of research, but we weren't pouring the grain to the cows, and he was treating them like commercial cattle. And that's where treating them like commercial cattle. And I was able to see, hey, there's certain cows that are doing it, that are giving me a calf every year. And so I know there's a bull, I would keep sons out of those bulls and breed them on the herds. And so it was there wasn't a set formula, but I know one of the things, for example, like Brahmins are notorious for having bad temperament problems. But that was one thing that I want to say it was in 2010 also, I got in a horse accident. I tell people I retired from being a cowboy that day. And so I know one of my first cooling deals I did is we have like a trip hopper that has the cubes, and that's how we catch cows. And I was like, if a cow doesn't follow that trip hopper, she goes to the sale barn. And so bam, there's 75 Brahman cows, registered cows that go to the sale barn. Bam, just like that. Hoof trimming, they're gone, or dummy calf syndrome, they're gone. And so anyway, it was like, I know at first it was kind of hard to see the progress, but 4 to 5 years later, even some of the employees we had or ranch hands we had at the time, they started seeing the change. And I don't know how common it is in other breeds, but there's a syndrome called dummy calf syndrome in the Brahman breed, and where a calf's born and has no vigor to get up and suck. And I started culling for that. And I know the ranch hands I had, like 5 years later, they were scratching their heads like, yeah, Grant, it's kind of weird. We don't really have dummy calf syndrome anymore. I was like, I know, guys. What do you think we've been doing?
And kind of when did you, I mean, there's still this process going on? Or are you still kind of continuing to improve? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Continuously culling. And I guess fast forward, I know we touched on boss sires earlier, but I know like you're awesome cattlemen all over the world. A lot of them are really scared to bring in outside genetics because it's hard for these cattlemen to get off their ranch, and a lot of them are tied to their land and cattle, and usually because they have a lot of cows too. That we kind of talked on it earlier about how do you become a cattleman or pick up on these concepts. A lot of it is like you got I was about to say economies of scale, but you have to have mass numbers to see trends or see things, and so it's hard for these cattlemen to get out. And I know I got in a big argument with a breeder in Colombia that I was telling him how ethically it's wrong that these non-fertile genetics are getting imported to Colombia and mass producing Colombia. And he's like, well, Grant, it's on the responsibility for the breeders in Colombia to travel to the States to figure out who has good cattle. And I was like, dude, come on. That's not very practical for someone in Colombia some rancher that has a bunch of cows to go on a vacation and travel all the states and figure out who's lying about records or who actually has good cattle. Like that's just it's not really feasible. So that's even me when I was growing up, I didn't know where to go, like what cattle I could bring in that wouldn't mess up what I was doing. But then lo and behold, working on this cooperative, I start finding these guys, and it's like, yeah, now I know of some outcrosses I could use. Wouldn't drastically mess me up. And like there's a bull I used from Australia from a friend of mine over there, and I made a couple embryo calves out of them, and they're freaking awesome. Didn't mess me up on temperament, and in this grass-only environment of my ranch, they're fat and happy. So I was like, there it is.
Earlier, you mentioned the Shackelford name, and that was kind of that gut punch, like, oh, wow, this guy's had these genetics for 60 years that I've been spent the last 10 years creating or whatever it was. Yep. Could you have gotten to where you are today faster using his genetics, bringing them in?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. It'd be... that's where it kind of makes me mad. Like, God, like if I had known about him, and I brought up Kimford Cattle Company earlier, it's two brothers, but what was sad is they saw what my dad was doing 15 years ago, and man, they kind of saw through it because George's brother are actual cattlemen, and they know what cattle are supposed to look like. And I'm not saying maybe they were laughing at my dad, I don't know, but fast forward to where I'm at today, and they see the kind of cattle I'm producing now, they're like, okay, Grant, this is completely different, or this is a Kallion 2.0. But even the Kimfords got good cattle, and that's what I was like, damn, if my dad had used George Kimford's cattle to begin with, imagine where we'd be today.
Right.
Because creating those 900 females, just think about the fortune of how much money went into that program. And imagine if we had started off with Marcus Shackelford or George Kimford to begin with. Like, there's no telling where we would be.
And that's kind of the idea of boss sires, right? Is to get all of these cattle that are of this type in one place and make them available to a broader audience, right?
For sure. And I know guys like George Kimford, like they got a big commercial operation, so they don't survive off of selling semen. Like that's never been, they've never needed to, never had to. Even George, like he knows what I'm up to, and that's where he's like, Grant, if my genetics can help some guy in Central America help feed his family, he's like, Grant, I'm in. That's But the other part is to help the guys that are doing the right thing down in these countries, to make to put them on the map and get people to realize, hey, that guy down there in Guatemala, he's not crazy. He's producing good cattle. Y'all need to listen to him. Plus, it also helps validate us up here that when I'm telling people that it's not nutrition problems, it's genetics. I know that sounds crazy, but when I go, well, look at that guy right there in Guatemala, he's doing it. Like, don't tell me it's impossible to have a cow that gives you a calf every year in these countries. It's very possible.
And I think a lot of that, in a lot of cases, a lot of that is just being able to resist marketing, right? Being able to resist, more pounds, more, bigger, faster, better, more. If you can just resist that marketing, then you can,
the shiny object,
right? Stick with what's been working. And
it's I compare it to restaurants. Hey, some of the best food out there is coming from the restaurant that has a really crappy sign out front, but hey, the parking lot's full. Yep. Like, they're not going to need a Facebook page or a website or Instagram to help promote what they're doing because, hey, they got good quality. But regardless, no, that's the same thing with cattlemen. That some of especially these older guys that are these older generations, they don't know how to use a website, or some of them don't. And some of them don't know how to use an email, or they're sure as heck not going to have an Instagram or a TikTok. But what's sad is, I think this is going on in other industries today, is word of mouth doesn't work anymore, and that the best product doesn't necessarily win anymore. And right now it's just, hey, what operation is best at marketing? That's what, that's who gets the glory right now, I guess. I know in EPDs, for example, that's touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's hey, your EPDs are meant for the feedlot. What? And it's just hey, what are you we're not supposed to be breeding for the feedlot. We're supposed to be breeding for the pasture, and that's just two different worlds.
If you breed for the feedlot or the packer is who's going to make the money, right?
Yeah.
If you breed for the pasture, then you get to keep more of that money.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I'm trying to wake up people that a lot of it's hey, we're becoming slaves to the cattle industry, and it's that's all you're doing is you're working for the bank to pay interest payments, or you're working to pay your feed bill, and you're working to pay the vet bills and the medical bills, and at the end of the day, you're left with nothing.
Yeah, if you do that long enough, we'll end up with the chickenization of the beef industry, where somebody will come in probably in a white pickup off your farm and make you an offer and say, hey, we'll own all the cattle. You just keep them alive and we'll send you a check guaranteed this amount every month. And there's a lot of people who probably take that deal because it's low risk, right? And I think that's we need to up the profitability of the beef industry so that we can protect against that.
No, you're 100% right, bud. That's sad that it is that close right now.
Yeah.
But no, and I know, I guess touching on it earlier, I guess when I was talking about, working on boss sires and studying these unique characteristics, that's where I've been trying to wake up people that, hey, we can scientifically prove that these cattle are right. And I know, Johann Zeitzman points out, EPDs are missing profit per acre. That destroys the whole concept. And I threw a wrench in another PhD guy's mind the other day. And I also told him, I was hey, EPDs don't capture that males and females are different. It's it's all widgets, or heifers and bulls are all the same. And then that's when they're oh crap, Grant, no one's really said that to us before. I was well, but I did tell him, I was guys, a hormonally balanced female and her hormonally balanced brother, they're going to act different. They are different fundamentally. And,
well, according to Steve Campbell, one's going to be walking uphill on level ground. The other one's going to be walking downhill on level ground. Yeah. So they're going to be mirror images of each other, really. The one's going to get bigger going forward. The other one's going to get bigger going backward. Yeah.
Well, I've just been, even on the spreadsheet, average daily gains, that a bull with a high testosterone like that, or that's earlier maturing, it's okay for him to have a decent growth. And I'm not saying crazy growth, but hey, he's got testosterone, he has some power. Well, his sister is a feminine female, and she's not going to be at the top of the pack in these growth charts or the average daily gains and all that. Like EPDs can't capture that. It's so anyway, but yeah, no, I guess we can go on and on that.
Well, yeah, just walk me through the process with Boss Sires. Talk to me from the cattleman side, somebody who's going to provide genetics to you. What's that process look like?
Well, right now, like I said earlier, it's to fix the incentive structure to where now there's already representatives in, for example, Honduras and Colombia, Mexico, and I need to travel to Guatemala here shortly. A guy heard about it and was super excited. But now for people internationally, if they want access to these genetics, there's a route now, or there is a direct path. Because I've been contacted for years from people in other countries, and like someone in Colombia 2 years ago, like, "Hey, Grant, I want to use your genetics. How do I get it?" And I go, "Well, I don't know." And we try to talk to the semen companies down there that have import permits, and they wouldn't help do business with us, and so it's like I lose the sale. And backing up to earlier, not trying to throw the tinfoil hat on again, but literally some of these the existing genetic companies down there, they've heard what I'm doing, and I've blatantly been told to my face that they can't promote these genetics, because if they promote these type of genetics, it destroys the existing status quo, and then their clients down there will figure out, well, hey, the reason my cows won't breed every year is because of the stuff I've been buying from this distributor. And then so there's a huge conflict of interest there. But I guess regardless of Boss Sires, that's where it has been starting from a grassroots effort, I guess, and finding guys that are willing to make a difference or trying to breed these good cattle down in these countries. And they're like, "Grant, I'll be a distributor in a heartbeat. Like this is awesome." So anyway, but up here, that's where I recently was up in Kansas and met with the Meitlers, Clinton Darris, and I know they're definitely going to help out with Boss Sires and help represent it here in the United States. And so for the guys out there that are breeding damn good cattle and they know it, it's like, hey, here's Boss Sires. We're hunting these guys, or we're hunting these type of genetics and trying to help put them on the map. And like I said earlier, just changing the incentive structure to where, because I know how the past 10 years, if someone buys bulls or buys heifers from me, 95% of the time it's either coming from a cattleman, or if it's a smaller operation, more of a hobby type deal, it's someone that's been in it for 4 to 5 years, and they've been seeing my literature, seeing what I've been running in magazines and social media, and then 5 years later, they finally call me. They're like, "All right, Grant, I get it. Now I get what you've been talking about for all these years." So they come to me and they sell barn their bulls and buy bulls from us, or they just kind of transition the herd over. So anyway, that's what I said earlier, is I'm trying to help fix the incentive structure, because there are guys like my dad that got into the business hard and went the wrong direction. And it's like, hey, what if those guys knew where to go to begin with? And so anyway, that's, like I said earlier, we're hunting the guys that are doing the right thing out there, and trying to help support this movement is what we're trying to do. And so I guess raising cattle, you're supposed to be helping to help feed the world, and it kind of starts with cows that are actually fertile to begin with. It's a good way to start. Yeah,
no doubt, for sure. So if somebody wants to be a representative or whatever, or wants to provide, say, hey, I've got cattle that fit this bill, is there some kind of a vetting process that they go through?
Yeah. No, it'd be, as of right now, like I said, this is still a newer company, so it'd be going through me or the Meitlers for now. And I know another thing that's been crazy is we added another type of membership deal, and it's nicknamed like the legacy membership, but it's there is guys out there that have already retired or only have 2 or 5 cows left, kind of deal, and like they've been fighting the good fight their whole life, and no one's listened to them. And here they are sitting on a semen tank with valuable genetics, and so that's where we're also getting those kind of guys in and helping get their story too, to where I guess when more people hear these similar type stories, then it makes it a lot more impactful, I guess. So yeah, that's kind of the two different types of guys. That there is your active guys that are in the same struggle or the same fight today, and then there's the guys that have did it their whole life and no one listened to. We're going after both guys right now, and but it has been pretty beautiful, and I don't know if we want to say beautiful, but fascinating meeting some of these old guys that have been breeding for 60 years and no one listened to them, kind of deal. And here we come in and like we're trying to help prove that, hey, they were right their whole life. But what's also scary is just the wisdom they have of breeding these kind of cattle for 60 years. Like they know so much upstairs and trying to get some of that or capture some of that. And that should be public knowledge. And but what's sad is like if these guys pass, like all their knowledge goes with them. And so it's kind of a scary situation we're in right now.
Sure. And then kind of looking at boss sires from the producer side, if somebody wants to say, hey, I would like to get some of those genetics into my herd, I want to, approach somebody. How does that work from the producer side?
Sure. No, all the breeders, all the information is public. It's all transparent. I mean, it'd be cool one day to do like a cattle range version of where if someone's using these kind of genetics, then they can have listings of actual live animals. But it's like, hey, for right now, we got to baby step the sucker. And so, hey, it's a directory for now. And but it's already kind of cool. It's already at work, even though we haven't even officially launched yet. Or maybe by the time this thing airs, maybe it's live. But we have already today, like a guy that bought a couple of heifers from me. He already went to Market Shackford and bought 10 heifers from him. And there's another guy just a couple of minutes, or has a ranch 30 minutes from me. He went and bought, I want to say 8 or 10 cows from Leo Casas a couple months ago. And he called me afterwards and he's like, Grant, it was freaking magic that those 10 cows all had their calves. And 45 days later, they're already back in heat. Yeah. He was like, Grant, this is insane that all these years I've been struggling, trying to figure out why his cow's going to have a calf every year. And then bam, here's Leo Casas' cows that just boom. Hey, it's pretty easy, buddy. It's the cow. So no, it's already at work. And I know, just the other day, some friends of mine put in an order. They're like, Grant, we need 100 commercial Brahman females coming from Boss Sire Genetics. Go get them. Mm. So the demand's out there. Like people they're looking and hunting these kind of cattle that just don't know where to go. And I guess that's where Boss Sires is trying to organize the chaos a little bit and point to people, hey, here it is. And I've been, like I told the Meitlers the other day, I was like, hey, we can educate and try to wake people up all we can, all we want, but at the end of the day, if they don't know where to go, then it's just like, hey, we're just leaving these people hanging. Like they gotta be able to point and say, here they are. So anyway, it's been really cool to see stuff like that already at work.
I don't know how the full launch of Boss Sires will go, but the website's definitely up. It'll be in the show notes page for today, and you can look around there at some of the people that are there, some of the countries that are represented. Is it easier to get semen out of the United States into other countries than it is to get semen from other countries into the United States?
Yes, for the most part, for dang sure. Like we can get Australian genetics over here.
Okay,
I got to do some more research, but yeah, for the most part, it is a lot easier to get the semen out. But like I said, I used that Australian bull, and the results were awesome. I know, but I guess quick side note, like literally this was literally yesterday. The Boss Sire co-founder for Australia, his name is John Atkinson, and this was literally 2 days ago. He called me. I guess it would have been late at night for me, early morning him, but he was super excited that over in South Africa, there's literally a grassroots effort company that started. I guess it was a father-son duo that the father was a badass breeder and the son was, I guess, somewhat like my generation that knew how to make websites and all that kind of stuff. And they're literally creating a cooperative company, I guess right now, or maybe they already launched it in South Africa, but they figured out the old guys had the best cattle, but they're terrible at marketing. So they did the same kind of concept. And so anyway, so John dropped the bomb about Boss Sires to them, and they freaked out and excited of hey, this can be an international deal too. Because like I said earlier, the same problems going on all over the world. But anyway, it's been cool to see the growth of this already. Well, and that was how I found the Meitlers, was from my buddy John Atkinson over in Australia. Because I told him, like, yeah, I gotta. I was kind of scared about the Hereford breed. I was like, I don't know much about the Hereford breed or where I go to for that. And he started laughing. He's like, well, Grant, that's the Meitlers. Called them up, and so anyway, this has been a fun journey for darn sure.
Well, very cool. Anything else that you really wanted to get said today, or something I missed?
If you could reorganize this or not, but I know one thing that, like when I was talking about these unique characteristics, I guess real fast off the record, I don't know if this is too controversial, but my embryo theory on how it's backwards, like if that.
No, I don't think there's anything such thing as too controversial. I'm a one-man show, man.
All right. Well, I don't want to send. I
don't have any genetics companies advertising for me. I think that ship sailed a long time ago when cool probably episode 121, when Gabe Brown said, breed your heifers for 21 days and don't feed them anything in the winter, and then you'll find the ones that are actually good cows.
Good cattle, yeah. Yeah, no kidding. I was literally for Boss Sires. I was trying to think of it, like, oh, it'd be cool to have sponsors one day. I was like, that's gonna be hard.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I guess backing up when I was talking about unique characteristics on what do I have in common with Marcus Shackford, George Kempfer, and Boys Australia and everything is one thing I definitely want to throw in there is I found out that universities are literally teaching people that fertility is not very heritable, and that's what's being told to ag departments all over the world. And because that was a big fight on one of the biggest reasons I created Boss Sires is because the existing companies out there don't push these type of genetics. Like my bulls, I have 2 Kallion bulls that are represented by a big company, and I got in arguments with the owner of the company that I was like, hey man, on the catalog, you got to at least put that my bulls are bred for productivity or fertility is something. Like, you can't just have them in the same lineup next to these show bulls. And because the people in Honduras, they see my bulls and think they're just bulls that didn't win a show. As soon as you try to argue with someone, they're just like, oh, well, that's not what the studies say. But then a friend of mine found a study for me from Australia. And the study in Australia used on they measured age of first CL, like when to heifer hit puberty. And then they also studied how long or how many days after calving does it take for a cow to come back in heat. And when those 2 things were the indicators for fertility, magically the heritability was freaking high. And so I've literally at PhDs here in the United States in their desk have had this argument with them where they're like, oh, the heritability of fertility is not very high. And I use that study from Australia. I'm like, well, look at this. And they're like, well, no, Grant, like it's more complicated than that. I'm like, no, it's not. You're making it more complicated. It's simple. I was like, you go ask any commercial cattleman, how do you know if a cow's fertile? And they're gonna be like, well, yeah, how often does she give you a calf? Like, that's a great way to measure how fertile an animal is. And I know Johann Zeitzman goes off on it too, and I 100% stand behind him. And but I also argue with people too that fertility there's 2 components to it. There's the body condition to be able to do so, or to be able to come in heat and whatnot, but also like from the Bosma side, the hormonal aspect, that there's a huge impact of fertility from the hormonal side, and the whole get into the femininity of females and masculinity of bulls. That and I know that's like when I was in Colombia, that's when it hit me that there's not many cattlemen left in the world. When I go to some of these operations, and they heard about my type of animal, that I like your moderate, deep body type stuff. And I remember one ranch in particular, there was, I want to say 10 heifers there, all on halters. And the breeders, they were young guys, and they were like all excited when I came, and they were like, Grant, you like these over here, right? And pointing at the moderate ones. And I was like, guys, if in reality, if I had to pick one of these females, it's actually that freaking tall one over there. And they were like, wait, what? Like, that thing goes against everything you're talking about. And I was like, well, no. I was like, guys, out of these 10, she's the only female. I was like, these other 9 are all hormonally jacked up. They're not females. I was like, so at least, I would take the tall one because at least she's a female. That gives me a chance. But then I showed them the calving intervals, the public data. I asked them, all right, these 9 over here, what are their sires? And we pulled up on the American website the sires, and I clicked on the dams of the sire, looked at her calving interval, and I was like, well, there it is, guys. It's a 1,300-day calving interval. And they're just like, holy, what? I was like, yeah, it's right there. And I was like, that tall thing over there, give me who's her dad? And they told me the dad, and I pulled up the dad, pulled up the mom, and I was like, there it is, guys, 362 day or something. Like, it was right there on the money. I was like, there it is. But anyway, I guess back to earlier when I was studying these traits that we all have in common, like one of the biggest things that you can call it controversial or not, but one thing all of us guys have in common is that our cows are lower on egg production if they do embryo work. And
per flush.
Per aspiration, per flush. Like on conventional flushing or IVF, like if someone's doing IVF and they just take in a cow, that these hormonally balanced females that are naturally fertile on average produce way less eggs. And it's been fascinating, especially some of these older breeders. Like he's become a friend of mine. His name's Hayden Moore, 83 years old, been breeding Brahmins for 60 years. And it's just time and time again, I hear this story, but I'll ask someone like, sir, have you done embryo work? And it's either no, they've never done it, or B, they're like, oh yeah, one time I tried, but hell, Grant, my cow didn't make many. I don't know what I did wrong. I just go, sir, your cow's fertile.
Yeah.
Or like Marcus Shackelford in Florida. Like the University of Florida's actually joined the Boss Sires cooperative. They have a Brahmin herd. But the university was real excited to use a donor from Marcus Shackelford. And so they bought this IVF or aspiration from Marcus, and because Marcus never did embryo work. And so they came over, took his cow to get aspirated, and she made 2 eggs. And they're like, what the?
Is the mechanism there that they're more potent per egg, so they don't need as many of them, or do you have any idea?
Yeah, what I think's going on, and this is all I think, so
right.
Please no one sue me on this, but what it is when a cow makes more eggs, it's a symptom that she's hormonally out of balance, that she's freaking out.
Sure. Like, I have to make more eggs because maybe some of them aren't as good as
something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And then in humans, it's literally called polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS. And a lot of women that have to use IVF to get pregnant, they have this syndrome called PCOS. And one of the main symptoms is that they produce a lot of eggs. So I'm like, hey, it's literally right there. And, but no, I guess what's been fascinating about some of this research is, like my Brahmins will have a shorter gestation length than your generic Brahmins, or I'll just call them generic Brahmins. But because a lot of people that are newer to the business, they would call me if they bought embryos from a mainstream breeder, and they would call me and they'd be like, hey Grant, what protocol do you use for inducing labor on your recips? And I was like, I don't know, guys, I don't. And they're like, well, what do you do when your embryo calves go way past the due date? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, it doesn't happen. They're born. But then studying these other breeds, that's when the light bulb went off that I think someone was talking about a South Pole. They bought some bulls from some South Pole bulls, and they're like, yeah, these bulls are awesome, and the calves are born 10 days faster. And I was like, wait, what? And they were like, yeah, these bulls' calves are born 10 days faster. And that was another big punch in my gut. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And a lot of this is old traditional cattleman wisdom too, that it was traditional wisdom that you keep your heifers that are born first, that those are always more productive. And I think that could be leading up to it is that they're born first. Well, maybe the moms have shorter gestation lengths, which means they're more fertile overall.
Sure.
But lo and behold, I know Australia has done some research on it, and I guess there's a balance to everything. And I guess there's breeders over there that go too hardcore on that and end up, if they're purposely breeding for shorter gestations, they might end up producing premature type calves or something. But I know another thing we brought up earlier was higher marbling, that all these cattle, the fact that they're easy flushing means they have the capability of marbling or to be able to grade well. And because I thought that was my niche, that my Brahmins were high marbling, and lo and behold, we did a test. Leo Casas, like, he hadn't retained ownership on his steers, and I told him, like, Leo, you're sitting on high marbling Brahmins, and he's like, Grant, there's no freaking way. I've never bred for that. I've never done it, never retained, never culled, never did anything. And I was like, Leo, you're sitting on it. So yeah, we went and scanned some of his steers, and sure enough, bam, his Brahmins were higher marbling. I know a lot of this too. What's been fascinating is that you're at the university level, there's been a lot of research comparing Bos Indicus versus Bos Taurus. I've been reaching out to universities like University of Florida. I was like, guys, that research, like, a lot of that isn't Bos Indicus versus Bos Taurus. That's productive versus non-productive. I was like, because on paper, my Brahmin herd on paper would look and sound like a Bos Taurus. That, hey, they're higher marbling, they're shorter gestation lengths, lower egg count on embryo work. A lot of these really fertile breeds, like your old school Angus, didn't make many eggs, and everyone assumed Brahmins just make a lot. I was like, well, no, Brahmins make a lot because they're not fertile. That's
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Which the answer was in front of my face. Like, one of my main studs is Mr. Kallion 1352. His cow family, which came from Mexico, some Mexican genetics. I remember doing embryo work 15 years ago, and we had a deal back then where we would pay on a per pregnancy basis, not on a per embryo. And that embryo lab back then hated me because I would bring in 1352's cow family sometimes, and like his aunts and his grandma and whatnot, and they were all super low producers on eggs. They would get so mad at me. They're like, Grant, quit bringing these non-fertile cows, and they're terrible. They're terrible. And I was like, guys, not my problem. I like these cows. They do everything I ask of them. And I'm not paying on a per embryo. I'm paying a per pregnancy. That's not my problem. They don't make many. And little did I know that was the sign in front of my face. It was right there, and I just didn't see it. I don't know. I guess due to social media is how I figured it out, though. I ran an ad exposing calving interval data, and afterwards on Facebook, a lot of these Brahmin show breeders were posting on Facebook after that ad saying, look how fertile our cow is. She made 150 oocytes and all these crazy numbers. And I was seeing this on Facebook just going, what the hell? My cow's never hit that. And it finally clicked. And so I called George Kempfer, was one of the first guys I called, and I was like, George, this is not a trick question. How many eggs do your cows make? And he was quiet at first. I was like, George, tell me the truth. This isn't it's not a trick. And he was like, Grant, I'll admit it. My cows don't make a lot. Like, oocytes on IVF, they might make 20 to 30, hell, sometimes less than that. And I was like, George, me too. He was like, wait, what? I was like, George, it's backwards. And that's where it's like, oh, crap. And the light bulb goes off. The answer's been in front of our face. But it's hard to prove at a university level because those are the same guys that think fertility is not heritable. So it's hard to get a research paper to prove it. But the one paper I did find was from down in Brazil. A PhD guy in Brazil did a study on follicle count. Was comparing the follicle count of cows and what was their pregnancy rate on an AI afterwards. But that's the only study I could find that alluded to that. And lo and behold, I found out that I was talking to a Brazilian guy and told him about that study from down there, and he was like, wait, Grant, you found that study? I was like, yeah, and it came from Dr. So-and-so. And he was like, oh, crap, Grant. The reason that study's not well known is because the guy didn't want it to become well known because he's scared of the backlash. I was like, oh, well, sorry, man. I've blasted it on social media already, buddy. Sorry. He's like, oh, crap.
That's funny. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time today. And we can get you back on and talk more as Boss Sires continues to grow, I'm sure, and talk more about kind of some of the stuff that you're seeing as commonalities from bulls and cows around the world.
Oh, it'd be awesome, bud. And like I mentioned earlier, some of these stories these guys have that have been breeding for 60 years, or 50 years, been doing it right their whole life. I'm like, their stories need to get captured. And not just the story, but their knowledge is insane. And But anyway, it'd be awesome to work with you again in the future for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely try and make that happen.
All right. Well, take care, and I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Grant, for your time today. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Very good stuff there with Grant. Very much appreciate the approach that he's taken and the goal that he has set for this venture, and just kind of what he's been able to accomplish. And I'll have some links again to videos that he's done with Boss Sires in the show notes page today at workingcows.net/398. Coming up next week on the Working Cows podcast, we're going to be talking to Jonathan and Stefan Bow about their seed stock operation there in Manitoba, and as well as in North Dakota. They're running a couple of different herds and doing some really good things with functional genetics for livestock producers that are looking for feminine females and cows that can get it done on grass and grade and marble well and all those things. So looking forward to that coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.